Hi guys, this is going to be a really quick video on solid principles. It won't be very theoretical, but I'll explain it with code examples. So solid principles are the 5 principles of object-oriented class. Uh, so every letter in the solid has a meaning. So S stands for solid responsibility principle, O stands for closed principle, open closed principle, L stands for Liskov substitution principle, I for interface segregation principle, and D for dependency inversion principle. And in this video we will look at the first 2 principles. In the next video we'll look at the next 3 principles. So the single responsibility principle basically states that every class must have only one purpose. So we'll try to understand that with the example. So I have a sample code here, which is like a bookstore. Now this code doesn't implement single responsibility principle yet. So first we'll look at what the code does. So basically we have a class book which stores all the data details of the book. Then we have a main class which is the invoice. This class generates invoice, but you can see that this class has a function called calculate total, which is basically invoice. So the class and the function is somewhat similar. The purpose is similar. The class is invoice and this generates the invoice. So one purpose is fulfilled, but we also have other 3 functions, which is printing the invoice and saving the file invoice locally or to database. We have not implemented it here. So as you can see, this violates the single responsibility principle because one class have 3 purpose. First purpose is to generate the total, second is to print, third is to save to the file. So now what we can do to implement the single responsibility principle is we'll have to split the code as much as possible. So what we can do is we can create a class, let's call it invoice printer, and this invoice printer takes in an invoice and the variable name is invoice, and we need a constructor to get the value, and this invoice printer must have one purpose, right, which is to print the invoice. So what we'll do is we'll copy this code from here, cut it, and we'll paste it here. So the class invoice printer has now one purpose, which is just to print the invoice. Now we have the value is in invoice variable, so we'll have to extend it, extend the values in the print statement as well. I'll do that now. Right, almost done. So now as you can see that the invoice printer class have one purpose, and we are passing the value of invoice in the constructor and it is being printed. Now we'll come back to our invoice class. Now this have 2 purposes now, which is to calculate and which is to save. We'll split even this. We'll just cut this. We'll create a new class called invoice saver, and it has the same invoice, and we need a constructor for this, and we will paste this. So now we have followed the single responsibility principle. As you can see, one class have one purpose, which is just to calculate the total. Printer is just to printing the invoice. Invoice saver is just to save the invoice, right? So now we'll try to print the values. So now when we call the invoice class, total is automatically stored by calling the calculate total function. So we'll just have to print the invoice. So for that we'll have to call the invoice printer class. Here we need to pass the invoice, which is this invoice, and we have the method called print invoice. So now we'll save this and we will run it, and you can see that the values are being printed just like it was being printed earlier. So the only difference is the code is much cleaner now, and it follows the single responsibility principle. So that was the first principle, and let me just check if the video is recording right. So the next principle is the open closed principle. So this means that a software entity, a class or a method must be open to extending, but it must be closed for modifications. So we'll see that with another example. So as I said, open for extending but closed for modification. So once we write a code, we must not keep on modifying it. That's the main principle. So we can see that we have a shape class here and a class called area calculator, which calculates the area of shape. So we are passing circle, rectangle, and it is calculating us, and it is giving. The only problem here is if I want to add one more shape, let's say I want to add one more shape uh, called a square, then I'll have to modify this function. So I'll have to add else if shape type is equal to square, and I'll have to return the values as say 2 into 2. So you see that for every new requirement I have to modify this code block, right? So this is a bad practice. So now we will use open close principle to rewrite the entire code. So what we can do is we can create a base class. Let's create a base class using abstract, and this let's name a shape. So we'll delete the previous class, and this shape will have a function called calculate area, right? So this is a base class, abstract class. Now when we'll have to create new class and implement this class, so we'll create a new class, let's say circle, and we'll implement shape. So if we implement this shape class, we'll have to override this calculate area function in our circle as well. So for that, what we'll do is we can just override this function. Calculate area is being overridden, and we need radius also, so we'll pass that value also. Let's say double radius, and we will pass that in constructor, and in the calculate area method we'll have to return the area, which is radius into radius, if I'm not wrong. So this is the implementation of the circle to calculate the area. Now let's say we have a new requirement which says create we need to calculate the area for rectangle as well. So instead of modifying in the existing function or class, we can create a new class, which is the principle of open closed, right? So we need a rectangle class which implements shape, and rectangle has length and breadth, so we'll just create length and breadth. I hope the spelling is right, and we'll have to pass it in the constructor. And we have to you can see that we have an error here, because when we implement shape we have to override the function as well. So we can just override the function, and we can return length into breadth. So you can see that we have split the code using open close principle. Now we no more need this area calculator. So whenever we need a new shape, we can just implement the shape and we can pass the values in calculate area. So we'll try to print this. So first we need to print the area of circle. So we will create an instance of circle. Radius we will pass it as 2, and we will call the calculate area function. Similarly for rectangle, we'll just call the rectangle class. Length is 3, breadth is 5, and in the end we'll have to call the calculate area function. So we'll just run this, and we can see that we have our values here. So that was open close principle and single responsibility principle. If you have any more doubts, comment down. I'll try to help as much as possible. And in the next video, we'll look into the remaining three principles. So I hope you like this video. Show your support by subscribing to this channel. See you in the next video.